Chapter 29. It's funny how sometimes the people you take a bullet for are the ones behind the trigger. Unknown. The patrol didn't show up that night or in the morning. I probably should have been on guard for them, but I didn't give it a second thought. Such was my feelings of security with my new setup. I was the first one awake in the whole campground, I think. So I made a bit of brekkie, had my usual daily percolated coffee made in a little Italian percolator over the gas ring with condensed milk in it to make it to caramel coloured and sweet. The coffee was accompanied by a couple of durries. No matter how off my food I got, I never not had my morning coffee and durries. It held me together. Health nuts would tell me I'm crazy, but unlike so many wellness freaks, I don't drink alcohol. I'd seen a great vid once that showed someone making a cold brew coffee on milk. As the beautiful caramel coloured liquids mixed together, the beautiful voice of the black woman narrator said, "If you replace your morning coffee with something healthy, you'll be depriving yourself of the little fucking joy that you get in your day." I was all for that. I was pissed off that the freaks in this campsite meant that I had to leave. I wanted to stay longer. Hell, if no one had made me, I'd probably stay a whole week rejoicing in the peace. I was going to try something else. I had a mate in Maltford who always encouraged me to come visit. I was reticent to trust anyone after the Adrian incident. Nio was the mate I met at the Murrurundi bike rally. She never talked about how linked to bikies she was, so I had no reason to really suspect that she had crim links. She was tight-fisted but always broke, so sometimes needed a little money here or there. I'd only lent it to her once and she made such a big deal about not being able to pay it back yet that I told her to forget it. It was only $30, but I wondered if it was her way of seeing if I'd lend more. So money could be a reason not to trust her. She'd mentioned that she had a spare room going and I was fully willing to pay to be around trusted people. Or was I crazy to trust Nio? But all of the grifts she's had on the go over the years that I've known her, she would have grifted me by now. On the flip side, she's a practicing Mormon, so I had to have some moral code also. I often wondered how hypocritical Nio was willing to be. I guess I'd find out. I gave myself a nice night before I wound up at Nio's. She's a very high energy, making jokes all the time that you have to laugh at. I really needed her to be a friend, so I'd really have to bust out the fake tiring laugh. Sometimes it was good, infectious, but I wasn't at my tip-top best, so it was going to be hard. I decided to stay in Bellsville. I checked out a van park on the outskirts of the town. It looked very dodgy, even dodgier than the Bogantown one. This wouldn't do. The one in town had no boom gate, but it was all surrounded by 10-foot fences. The managing couple were really nice too. And the van park was nice, nothing sus. There was a huge storm soon after I arrived and I hid in my van despite how hot it was. I even spoke to a fellow female solo traveller, an older woman in an A van. I was so grateful to have normal conversation. The next morning I spoke to a female couple travelling in an old coaster. One of them gave me such a long story from her life. It was traumatic, but still I enjoyed just being an ear to chew. There was a young backpacker in a van parked near me that I'd noticed on the road to Bellsville. I was immediately suspicious. When I left the park at 10 a.m. the next morning, I sat outside and watched him. He spent ages in the men's toilet, then came out. I followed him when he drove out of the park, but he took a side street. He knew I was following him, so therefore he had something to do with this. I texted Nio asking if it was cool if I showed up, and she was as welcoming as ever. Sheer relief. When I got there, she was at work. Nio was an EN who worked in patient transport vehicles. As I entered the backyard, I ran into her son, Rangi. He, his partner, and 2 daughters were living in Nio's lounge room. Her other daughter and boyfriend, along with a friend of theirs who actually had his own home, were living in all the other rooms. The last time I'd spoken to her, she said that she had a spare room. I didn't think Nio had lied to me about having a spare room. I figured that things had changed since we last spoke. She was always supporting her kids and extras. Her son Rangi was a self-taught tech bro, making his money from Bitcoin. I know, maybe he's just a garden variety drug dealer and that's his cover. I didn't know and didn't care, as long as he wasn't in on a plot to kidnap me. If anyone was, he'd certainly be. Along with supporting 2 teenage daughters and his partner, he had experience with the dark web, having been a member of Anonymous for a bit. I greeted him as he was sitting outside having a durry, so I sat with him for a bit. I started to just spill out the whole story to him, even including the cult in Mirrawong. Rangi seemed to be onto it. Because he'd been in some dark places, he gave me good advice about what had happened with Billy. He affirmed that she probably hacked me. He even checked my phones for malware for me. Verdict, they were clear. I felt so much better talking to Rangi. His partner was friendly enough to me. There was something about her that was cloying though. I found myself getting defensive while talking to her. It was hard. The 2 daughters were around, but neither of them spoke, such is the shyness of homeschooled kids. Nio eventually came bowling in. As she hugged me, she observed, "You keep losing it and giving it to me." She had that cheerful Maori way of making jokes about everything. Her attitude to life is contagious. Nio was shorter than me and had gained a bit of weight, but that was part of her job. Her rounded back and shoulders were due to being a nurse and lifting the heavy weights that go with lifting patients. I reckon some nurses could walk onto building sites and do builders' labourers' jobs quite easily, and it's a shame they're not known for their physical strength. She had some 0 beers in the fridge, so we both sat outside at a table and caught up. I didn't bother telling her the whole story. In fact, I told her not a lot. It's better to listen to Nio yak anyway. I made sure to cook my own food and be a really thoughtful guest. As I was tooling around in the day, lying on Nio's bedroom floor and watching movies on her massive TV, I was grateful for Rangi's company when he'd finally get up. His partner said that he stayed up all night to catch the Bitcoin markets on US time. That could be the case. I never heard him go out at night, which would spell drug dealer. I felt like a bit of a loser hanging around all day. Nio had suggested I get work in Maltford. She'd suggested this before though, even telling me that I should sign up for patient transport driver jobs. I looked into the process at one stage while I was living on the mountain. It looked too complicated. My work history is sporadic and government departments don't like that. The other 2 rooms in the house were occupied by Nio's daughter, her boyfriend, and a male friend of theirs. They were all in their 20s. Nio's daughter's name is Maori and I couldn't get it locked into my head. It didn't help that everyone seemed to call her a different nickname based on her actual. I just avoided calling her anything. And she avoided talking to me altogether. Her rudeness wasn't new though. I'd stayed here before and she was rude to me then too. The boyfriend was a skip and a skinny streak of a one too. He'd been nice to me on the last visit. This time he didn't speak to me much either. I just let it go and flow. The friend, a cherubic-looking pudgy skip who worked for a cash-collecting security firm. Just in the office, but still, when I first noticed his security firm work shirt, it was enough to worry me. They have access to guns. He spoke to me though reticently. The daughter also wore a security shirt, I noticed. I saw it and commented that she'd changed jobs. She was walking out the door to work, so feigned being in a hurry to avoid engaging in convo. She would have been good at security work as she was big, strong and bulldogish. She frightened me, if I'm completely honest. There was some kind of vibe in this house that wasn't welcoming. I figured Nio probably bitches her guts up to her kids about whoever, me at the time, and the kids aren't grown up enough to just see through it and form their own opinion about me. I would remain friendly to them whatever happened. Perhaps it was because I'd been a bit defensive towards her at first, but Rangi's partner was sometimes quite smug to me. It also didn't help that I would sit out and yarn with Rangi for ages. They were both Trump supporters. That went with the territory of being chronically online. The partner was a bit of a twit about it though, and while I didn't debate with her, there was no point. She was susceptible to the brainwashing type of Trump support. I pointed out that it depended where you got your news. The things she'd accused Biden of doing were actually done by Trump. It's alarming when you step outside your own progressive bubble and hear what's being said in ultra-conservative bubbles. One arvo, I was walking back to the house after going to the servo for toothpaste. I didn't feel like going to a grocery store. The daughter rounded the corner I stood on in her car. She didn't wave, didn't make eye contact, but looked upset. It was all over her sulky face, more sulky than usual. I had no clue what that was about. She sure didn't stop and offer me a lift. Another Arvo, Naya, was busy organising a special roast dinner. I even went into town with her to get groceries. It's safe with someone else, especially a powerful little Maori woman like Naya. I gave Naya a pineapple for the groceries, so I basically paid for the whole dinner and she would have had some change out of the 50. She didn't offer any of it back. That's Naya. Some Mormon elders were coming to dinner that night. Elders is hilarious. They send barely legal boys from Utah and other Midwest states who were considered elders only because they're male. I wasn't looking forward to the evening. Organised religion is creepy enough to me, but strict, weird, creepy religion was worse. I'd gotten into an argument about gay people and the Mormon attitude about them. No, it doesn't matter how open-minded you claim to be. If a young person becomes aware that you're Mormon, they understandably get nervous about it. Don't blame me, I don't make the rules. She was pretty good at talking around the obvious, and I think she even quoted that awful saying, "Don't hate the sinner, hate the sin." It's so condescending. I nearly didn't come to the dinner, but changed my mind in the end. My other option was to just lay out in the van the whole time. That would have been a weird thing to do. Plus, I'd paid for dinner. The boys showed up. I refuse to call them men. They're too young. One was small, blonde, pale, and would have been a classic incel in the real world if he wasn't under cult rule. The other was taller, brown-haired, blue-eyed, and apple-cheeked. His way of communicating reminded me of my mate, Adrian. So this poor kid was probably in the closet. I really felt for him. He would have been an intelligent and witty gay man in the real world. He was literally rolling his eyes at this dinner scene he was in. I was engaging them the most in convo because everyone else was so weird and shy. Rangi looked like a deer in the headlights. His partner didn't speak much because he wasn't talking. Their two kids were already silent, but they somehow achieved a higher state of silence. The daughter, son and friends showed up briefly, but they were very quiet too. They took off to basketball. I didn't really appreciate having to hold the whole conversation. Naya would ask questions too, but she wasn't into high maintenance people, being high maintenance herself. Eventually, Rangi started to relax and joke around them. I liked listening to them and gave them heaps of compliments on their brave journey that they'd undertook. I couldn't believe myself. These people belong to something I'm totally against, but I don't let that stop me from boosting them up. In my mind, that's true Christianity. Curiosity is my religion, and I was focusing on being curious about their lives. Also, I would bank money on the fact that though they were the demographic that would access my IBA footage, the cult prevented them from watching porn, so they were safe. I even made the blonde one chuckle, which made me happy. He needed a laugh. Something about running over wombats. As the dinner ended and all the children, Rangi and partner included, took off, something weird happened. Nayo asked, "So is it time to give the message now? Do you do that at the end of dinner? How do we do this?" The rituals and traditions are obviously not that high in her priorities. They said that they usually give a message before they go. This consisted of them reading a passage from their Bible and we discussed. It was a few generalized lines about the Lord giving challenges to those who can handle it, or some other shit that makes excuses for the fact that society, human existence in general, is deeply broken and full of pain. The gay one did the reading and they seemed to exhibit the boredom about it that I was managing to conceal. I again started the conversation on it first by saying that I've been through difficulties lately and that I was grateful for Naya. She was my guardian angel, etc., etc. And then I teared up and cried. I couldn't believe it. Naya was warm about it and reached out a hand. The elders didn't know where to look. They are just boys and ill-equipped to deal with adult problems, adult emotions. In a way, I kind of exposed how hopeless they are at being spiritual counsellors. They aren't spiritual counsellors. I'd been sleeping in my van out front on the street for the past 2 nights. It had been a bit noisy with traffic, but nothing I wasn't used to. One very early morning, a big four-wheel drive shone its lights into my back door and revved its engine. It may have been the neighbour getting up for work, or pissed off that I was taking a spot. I really hoped against hope that it wasn't sus. On the night of the Mormons, I took myself off to bed early as usual. I couldn't sleep, so snuck a late night dart. I opened up my side door and sat in the van. The chubby friend had a big fuckwit truck and it was parked in the drive diagonally across from my position near the street corner. The lights were on, but they were dim from being left on. His battery would have been drained. I thought about going inside and telling him until I saw a shadow move by the truck. It froze when it saw me. Then another two figures popped up. They turned the ignition off. They all froze like statues for a bit. Then they all trooped inside. 3 guilty shadows. I could tell by the heights that it was the chubby friend, the bulldog daughter, and the long streak that was a boyfriend. That was some seriously guilty shit. I would have laughed at these 3 musketeers' shadows if I wasn't made.